Hello and welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In this episode, we're going to get going on getting the carbon fiber hood made. You didn't think I wasn't going to make a hood, did you? Right? In the end, of course, I've had this mold for a very long time. It's probably one of the first molds I ever made. So there are challenges with this mold. So that's why I've left it to the end. I didn't want to kick the series off with sort of one of my trickier molds. I thought I would gain a little experience first and then see how everything went. So this particular mold has a relatively narrow flange. Now, before everyone starts yelling in the comments, we'll see what we can do with it. We're hoping it all works. Typically, of course, we wouldn't make our molds like this. We would make our molds with a much, much wider flange. Right, so try for at least 6 inches. 6 inches is nice because it gives you lots of room to work. 6 inches, so 150 millimeters. Try for at least 150 millimeters. This particular flange is more like about 80 or 90 millimeters, so it's not even close to being what I would optimally like to have. But hey, it's what I have. I made it about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's been sitting in my shed ever since because I didn't know what to do after the fender debacle. All right, so we're going to get the mold prepped. It's been sitting for a long time. It's a little dirty. It's going to need a lot of cleanup. And we've got just a couple little repairs to do. But I hope that we'll have just the one episode, actually. There should only be one episode on this. At least I hope. I don't know. You know how. You've been watching. You know how this stuff goes.
Okay, so in comes the hood. Now, you can't see some of the damage and dirt and things on it here, but I'm just giving a little bit of a soak down with some Windex and getting all the grime and stuff cleared off of it from 4 or 5 years sitting out in the shed. And then there's some issues around the edges just with the gel coat. I was having terrible trouble with this regular white gel coat, especially with pinholing. It was just my application wasn't done properly. Anyway, a couple areas in there, just filling some pinholes with a little bit of lightweight body filler, and then coming back at it here, I'll be using some tooling gel coat, which, boy, it sure does work a lot better than the regular stuff to get this area fixed up. Okay, so that tooling gel coat's now had 24 hours to fully cure, and I'm coming back and we're just going to get it knocked back really quickly with some 80 grit sandpaper. So I want this panel to be nice and flat and smooth, and you do need to get some pretty aggressive sandpaper in order to get things flat. Then we're going to just hit it with a little bit of wet and dry, and then on we go with the sealer schedule. So the mold needs to be sealed because of the new gel coat areas. And there's a strict protocol for the application of the sealer. So first I'm going left to right, then I'm going to go up and down, and then we'll go 45 degrees and 45 degrees. Now each one of these coats is allowed to fully dry for 20 minutes to an hour. I usually leave it, and then come back and just give it a quick wipe. Then the mold release goes on, same application protocol. So try not to overlap the strokes. The idea isn't to rub it in, it's just to lay it on. So you're more or less painting it with a paper towel onto the mold surface. Again, it allows it to fully penetrate the area. The application protocol is there so that each different orientation of your stroke allows it to cover the area fully. All right, so with that, once that's all dried and cured, we're going to go back in and prime the mold. And as usual, I double tape just because it's a good way to test whether or not your release agent is going to release. If your tape won't stick, your mold won't stick. So I always have trouble with that. Anyway, the Duratec Vinyl Ester primer goes on now. Again, it's I typically prime my parts, as you now know. And I love that stuff. You just pound it in, no problems at all. And then I go ahead and I make another pattern. For the cloth, the carbon fiber cloth, I need to economize as much as I can. And because this mold has such a narrow flange, I decided to put the tacky tape, the bagging tape on first. I normally don't do that because all the glues and other things get all over the thing, all over the flange, and then you have to clean it off. So this time I did it. The lines I've just drawn on there show you the strength of the satin weave material that I've been using to make all of my carbon fiber parts. So once it's laid on, I just spray a little bit of Fibertack MT1 blue spray adhesive on, and then that Bondo applicator, the plastic applicator that you see me using there, is really very important at this stage. You need to make sure that you get all of your fabric materials pressed down really firmly into the mold, and that you're not relying on the vacuum in order to press, in order to provide the pressure. I've seen on other channels where people suggest that you just lay the fabrics in fabric in loosely and then allow the vacuum to pull it down. It just, that I've been told it doesn't work very well, so I've never done it that way. Anyway, on with the core material. So before we light up the comments again with questions about core materials and the fact that these parts aren't structural, sorry, the parts for this hood are structural. Yay! So this is a structural part, people. There's absolutely no interior framing on the hood. It's just a piece of sheet metal and nothing else. So with the carbon fiber, we're going to have to add the core material to have the necessary stiffness for this part to ensure its long-term durability. So I've laid out the 1.5-inch grid there, just using a 2x2, which is 1.5 by 1.5 inch. And that's the prescribed pattern that's listed and advised by the people who will not only sell it, but the people who make this core material. So 1/8 brad point drill bit and a couple of hours actually worth of work gets you a core material that's ready to go. So once the pattern has been drilled out, I then cut out the individual pieces. And what we need to do to ensure that the parts don't get any bridging so that the fabric isn't sitting up on the edge is we're going to sand all the edges of these pieces of core material very carefully. First I trim them with a knife. So I trim them at about a 45-degree angle with a knife right down to that bottom edge. Then I grab my Permagrit sanding block and sand off the edges, and then the part's finished and ready to go. It sands easily, it works easily, it cuts really nicely. I don't see any reason why people, don't shy away from using a core material if you want your parts to be very stiff. That's what it's there for. So at this point, I'm just showing you that we're going to measure all of the fabric, not just the one that I demonstrated there, which is that 12K 200 gram per square meter biaxial material. So it's got strength running in two different ways. We're going to weigh all of the material that we put into the mold, and then as I trim that edge off, I collect all of the trimmings and then I weigh those and subtract it from the total. You will need to have the total weight of all the materials that are in the infusion in order to properly calculate the resin amount. So this is the third layer of carbon fiber, again with the satin weave. And I've placed it with the strength orientation running east and west across the hood this time. And as we go on with the core material, I switch glues up here. So I'm going to use 3M Super 77. You can see it right there. It just gives me a little bit more stick than the Fibertack MT1, which is really fantastic for carbon fiber application because it doesn't have a really strong stick. It's just enough to hold it in place. Anyways, we work that material in where it's needed, and then watch here as that Bondo applicator comes back out, and I'm very carefully working and diligently working the material into the tight edge that I happen to have on this particular hood. Again, weighing all the waste as we go on. So this is, I don't know, how long did this take? This is a good 4 or 5 hours worth of work for me to do in order to get this done properly. So plan on taking some considerable time in order to get the fabrics laid in the mold nicely. If they're going to lay, in my short experience, if they lay in the mold nicely, everything else pretty much goes well on the part. Next up is the peel ply layer. This is a Teflon coated peel ply, and absolutely marvelous, just wonderful stuff. I also just dabbed it in with this Super 77. It doesn't need to be glued in really firmly. I just tack it in a couple areas where it needs it. And then I use the wider flow media here, and I placed another flow media channel in through the middle. basically, I had a great conversation actually with Joel Marsh of Marsh Composites, and he suggested that I run the infusion lines in the following way. So down the sides, we're going to put the spiral wrap. So that's going to be where the vacuum is going to be applied. And then across the top where that pink line is going in is going to be a solid line, so no vac will go in there. And then I'm going to add the resin. So the resin port is going to be into the center with just an extra piece of flow media in there to help it get distributed throughout the mold. So first up with the bagging material, you tape the corners up and start applying it. Now the bags are huge when you put them in. This bag is at least 30 centimeters per side larger than it needs to be to just simply cover it. And it seems outrageous when you do it, but that's the right size for the bag. Now I've just I've slowed everything down and taken it off stop motion here just to show you the detail of how to apply the tacky tape and make pleats. So I plan out my pleats now very carefully as to where each one goes. And then I put my tape loop in. I press down very carefully on the tape loop, make sure the corners are bonded, and then I leave the backing tape on the tacky tape, fold over the pleat to where I want it made, make sure I'm happy with it, and then I take that tape off and execute that pleat. So I'd adhere the bottom corner, pinch up the sides, and pinch off the top. Then once I've got almost the whole bag finished, I need to be able to match the perimeter of the mold to the perimeter of the bag. And I found that quite tricky. So what I do, the method that I've used is to reverse the direction of the tape application. So before I was going from on your screen from the right side to the left, now I'm going from the left to the right. I then fold over that and make sure that the bag perimeter pulls down tight onto the tape. And once I'm sure that I've got a big enough loop to do that, here you can just see me pinching off the last part here, and that's pulled that bag down tight, and I've got a really good seal all the way around the bag. So first couple of times I tried to do this, I mean, I've scrapped bags, I've had problems, and if you've watched the video series, you've seen some of these things over time. All right, so here I am just going to finish off all the rest of the pleats. So now that you see how slowly I actually go when I make these, you can kind of figure out what my frame rate is for these time-lapse videos. Okay, so I continue to work that edge just as the first vacuum is pulled, and you can see it vacuumed up really nicely. So super happy with the way this one all sealed up.
Okay, so now what we have is the vacuum is being pulled here. And whenever you pull a vacuum, let it sit for at least 15-20 minutes and make sure that you don't have any vacuum drop. So in this case, it's now been sitting for half an hour. I've had 0 vacuum drops, so that means the bag is okay. It's not leaking. The bag sealed up right away for me this time, folks, so pretty happy about that. So now we're going to get on and start mixing the epoxy. As I've said before, mixing the epoxy resins is not exactly the easiest thing in the world. I almost always use a 2-bucket approach, and I'll be doing that today. So I'm going to put the resin in 1 bucket because for this particular application, I'm going to need almost 3.5 kilos of resin, and I'm going to need 1 kilo of hardener. And if I mix them this way, then I can put the 1 bucket into the other, and I'm not going to risk splashing, and I'll be getting my eye protection and things on here just as we get rolling. The hardener is very corrosive, so you want to be careful with that hardener. And you're going to add it very carefully, and then you're going to stir. It doesn't matter how long you stir. It can sit in the bucket for, in this case, about 8 hours, and nothing is going to happen that's bad. So without any further chatter out of me, let's get mixing. Zero it up. Now, my epoxy came in a great big, I don't know what this is, like several, I think it's done in weight. So this is, well, it's 4.22 gallons, whatever that is. And 40 pounds, whatever that is. So anyway, and because the shop is small and everything's dirty, I just use an old glove over top of the end. It's a little bit whatever, but it works. And then it always drips and leaks whenever you drop it over the edge of the bench to pour it out. So I have a bucket that's sitting here on the floor to try to stop that. So with this all zeroed, and the air out, like we need 3.4 kilos. So basically, we're going to be here for an hour while this pours out. It's not super fast. and it's just a quick tip, and you never saw it from me, and I for sure never told you to do this. But a little bit of compressed air in the container, right, encourages flow. On goes the scale again. Down goes the blast shield, and we're looking for 985. Such a full mix in this giant bucket. I will decant part of it into another bucket, just for just to make sure I'm getting it mixed properly. This is the really hard part, is like these two components. They're very thick and they do not want to mix. But you don't want to have areas of resin that don't get married to the hardener. Almost, it's like the bottom of the pail and stuff, that's where that's always going to happen. These bamboo stir sticks are great for this. They're nice and flat. They're smooth on the sides. You can scrape the sides of the bins really well and get this stuff all mixed in perfectly.
All right, because of the size of this particular mold and it's 6 layers of carbon fiber with a core, I'm going to be infusing extremely slowly here. So I've cut almost all of this out. It's super important to have those line clamps in there, the German Advanced Composite squeeze clamps. Awesome, just to make it go nice and slow, exactly the right rate, so that everything gets covered in the time that I have allotted to do this. So total infusion time, 2.5 hours.
All right, so I came out, it's what, 11 o'clock at night. I just came out to have one last check on the progress before I went to bed, only to find the furnace won't be making a whole lot more noise anymore, because that blade, I actually found it on the floor, so that's not good. And then I noticed all around the edge of the mold, look at all that, that's come out of the furnace tonight. Oops. I've got the space heater on below. Hopefully it'll keep things warm enough to actually have the chemical reaction go off and have all this harden up. Alright, the adventure continues. Alright, so it's now 9:30 the following morning. I've been up all night taking care of this. The furnace has been going. I attached the barbecue lid. You remember, you've seen the barbecue lid before. So we attached the barbecue lid so that we're not directly heating the mold. And then the warm air is being blown underneath the mold, and everything I think is okay, except for me. I'd like to get some sleep, but let's see if we can get that to focus there. It's about 23 degrees Celsius for and the front side of the mold. Well, that was the wall, sorry. 18, 19 degrees. What an unbelievably long night that's been. So I spent most of the night out here in the garage monitoring the stove that I put up underneath the thing. This is what's left of my furnace fan. So two of the 5 blades have gone missing, and the other ones are all fractured and broken. So with that done, let's get the bagging material off the mold. It's now sat for more than 24 hours. We should be just fine, I think, with it. It's the mold surface temperature never exceeded 30 degrees Celsius, so we should be fine there. Shouldn't have been a problem. And super looking forward to how this all turned out. I mean, if I hadn't come out and checked the one last time before I went to bed last night, I never would have known, and I would have woken up to a part that would not have cured. So super, do remember to check, folks. So, that looks great. And now
sneak in an edge. Not anything crazy with it. I just want to. Just need a bit of light. The edge is releasing okay. It's tight, but not bad. So this does seem to be the way to do it. The first one in, and if I try to move it without the air, it doesn't want to move. Air just helps it release. Oh, there it goes. Look at that. I already saw a pop, right? So we stick the soft wedge there. And then just... yeah, that's gonna work. Look at that. Whew. Oh, you can already tell. Oh, ho, ho. There, we get rid of them all. Just one little pop, and up she went. Woo! Super excited. This looks good. This looks good. There's nothing on the mold. Oh my. Again, this is really weird, people. I'm like, this hood weighs nothing. There it is. There it is. In all its glory. Woo! Oh my, look at that. What a thing. What a thing. Oh, God, that looks good. Now again, just for those that are interested, like, I don't care what you do with that. You'll never, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's so nice. This hood is absolutely gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
Okay, so that's going to be a wrap for this episode. I just wanted to once again thank you for coming along on the adventure. It sure has been fun getting this, the carbon fiber hood skin pulled. And in the next episode, we're going to have to address the fact that we need a frame for the skin. All right, so tune in next time when we have a look at how we build that frame. Thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next episode.